I would request Design Guru Professor Lalit Das to kindly join us on the stage for the felicitation ceremony. Also requesting DC Sir to please do the honors. It's my pleasure on behalf of the whole university.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, so sweet. Lovely. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because
Thank you.
we have it together.
Thank you.
This house. Thank you so much. We can have Professor Das.
Sit down here.
One by four. You have it.
I have it. It's nice.
On to now. Listen.
Go on, eh?
It's a color.
Hello, hello. Thank you very much, Sanjay, for inviting me over. And I think it's a great initiative that you have taken. And by taking this initiative, you have really increased the status of World University of Design. This is a type of a initiative that NID should have taken. Uh, then they would have been leaders in design. Unless you recognize others' contribution in the field, you can never be a leader. And I think you have taken this initiative. Your colleagues have supported you in this. And I think it shows that World University of Design has a future which is unfolding. Um, what is, I had done my BTech from civil engineering from IIT Kanpur. But my interest was always in design, but we did not know what design is at that time, really. At that time, design meant making bridges, making buildings, roadways, etc. It's more to do with infrastructure. But there was a professor, maybe I can go to the first slide, next slide. Professor B. Karunesh, and a very flamboyant person. He would dress up in a sherwani with chudidar pajama and would be drinking a lot and would be carrying a gun with him also. And he would drive in a jeep and would love going out for hunting. But as a thinker, he was a profound, a deep thinker, very playful in his thinking also. And he started a course called design engineering. Um, it was like one of those TA courses that you have in the first year. So this was a course in design engineering. I was not in the section that was taking this course, but accidentally one day um, I happened to land in his class. And he was trying to figure out how to take care of the water supply problem of a city. For me, it was a mind opening lecture, because what he was doing at that time was what we understand today as mind mapping. So at the young age of 17, I was introduced to mind mapping. And since this was only an incidental lecture, I had no compulsion of memorizing anything, or so it's something that stayed at the back of my mind. And during the 5 years that I was there at IIT Kanpur, I was actually doing mind mapping. And I realized that how one thought leads to another thought. And there are some thoughts or some words which contain other thoughts. And I think this is very important how um, knowledge is nested. And once we understand this nesting of knowledge, I think it is a great beginning that happens. Um, After completing my civil engineering, fortunately, my teachers, my mentors in civil engineering department did not push me in the direction of civil engineering. They could see that my interest was on the creative side, and they pushed me to pursue the field of design. There was not much design that we knew about. So there were two options that were there before me. One was there was one Professor Keshwan from the electrical engineering, and he had moved to University of Waterloo, and he started a program on system engineering at the University of Waterloo. So I had applied there. I got admission also. Uh, then the other option was this person, Professor Karnesh. He had moved over to IIT Delhi. And at IIT Delhi, he had started an MTech program in design engineering. Now, this MTech program in design engineering was not in any specialized field of design. So it has nothing to do with machine design or building design or structure design. He had realized the importance of design as a profession itself, but he was approaching it from the engineering viewpoint, not from the art viewpoint. Now, during the course of this, I was doing in very interesting projects, and they had modified this program also. And there were courses on system um, thinking, and there were courses on human factors. There were also courses on corporate policies and things like that. So it's a very interesting program. What was more interesting was that I got introduced to some of the seminal works in the areas of system thinking and human factors. The Penguins have brought out a series on system thinking and human factors, and it had all the seminal papers that were in this field. So I was exposed to that. I did my project as part of MTech, and this project was to do with visualizing um, how bodies move in orbits. So, in other words, you launch a satellite. It was the 60s, let's say end of 60s. Uh, US had US had already landed man on the moon. So it was a hot thing to understand for the students um, how a satellite is captured by the gravitational field and what type of orbits can happen. So they can be a circular orbit, an orbital orbit, or it can be a sling shot. Mm. So the gravitational field of a planet or a moon can be used as a sling. Mm. And my job was to demonstrate that. So it was an interesting thing. So I created a magnet, a powerful magnet. See, a magnetic force is also has a uh, inverse square law, as the gravity has. So there is an analog between gravitational and magnetic field. And I created a magnet, and I was able to roll down a ball. And if I would increase the speed of the ball, it would change or modify the type of orbit that would happen. And I was able to capture. So I placed a paper and a carbon sheet, and the ball would move on the carbon paper sheet, and it would leave an impression. So it was interesting, and it so happened at the time Professor Misha Black, Sir Misha Black, he had come from RCA, and he saw that project, and he was quite happy. And in a way, at the back of my mind, when I was conceptualizing this design, I had the image of James Watt uh, sitting by the kettle, hmm, and watching the going up and down of the lake. And now here is an experiment which doesn't require his attention. He's only observing. And that was the interesting part. So I said, I must make my product so that a person can keep performing different variations and keep observing. So if the ball rolls down, and so it would get collected very close to him, and he could very easily pick it up and place it again with a different speed. So the human factors was so well designed that Professor Misha Black was quite happy with it, and so he gave me a chance uh, to come to the Royal College of Art, and that was a beginning, and it was a very profound, important beginning. Going there, I realized that I was doing an entirely new set of neurons in my head, and that was a lovely experience. And I think it's very important that uh, in all education programs, we focus on the entire set of our thinking apparatus, which we don't do. We have five senses and actions, activities associated with the five senses, but we seldom cultivate them. We have the right side of the brain, the left side of the brain, but either the education is left sided or it is right sided. There is no reason why it should not be complete. Fortunately, in design education, we allow all these things to happen. And I think this is where I found it very satisfying. Let's move to the next slide. At IIT Kanpur, I also happened to uh, listen to this gentleman. You know who he is? Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And during those years, he was quite a phenomenal person. The Beatles, etc., was forming around him. So I attended his lecture, and then I went through this meditation course that his disciples were teaching. And why I bring this in is that there is a certain relevance to our traditional uh, practice of yoga and meditation, and its relevance to design. And what he was really saying is that how thoughts how thoughts bubble up. So, and how one thought leads to another thought. And and I think that was an interesting understanding. And next slide. So this is Misha Black, who was the head of the industrial design program, and he was very clear that engineering education has de-emphasized design by too much emphasis on analysis. In the process, they have missed out on a mind as a tool for creativity and innovation. So this was an understanding that they had. And he was very keen that engineers should come into design and look into design. Next slide. There I met another professor, Howard Upjohn, and he was essentially specialized in the area of instrumentation. And since I was part of the Instrument Design Development Center here, they associated him with me. And one day he mentioned this small statement that design is building relationships. I say, how interesting is this definition of design? It is so open. We have to discover the relationships. And creativity is to do with developing or discovering new relationships. It is this discovery that makes a design innovative. This thought was a turning point in my thinking, and I realized that all thinking is relational in activity, is a relational activity. So whether you are talking of algebra or physics or chemistry or history or sociology or economics, they all are exploring relationships. A poet is also exploring relationships. A mathematician is also exploring relationships. The type of relationships that they are exploring is different. And this is one thing that we have to, in my TED Talks, I have dwelled more intensively on this phenomena. Let's move to the next slide. So, all thinking, learning is about relationship, and thinking is about finding relationships. Evaluating is about critically evaluating relationships. Design is building relationships. So, often I ask my student, what is thinking? And they get confused. And many words are it's analysis, it's synthesis, it's critical evaluation. But understanding thinking as something to do with relationships is a profound changed understanding. It's a breakthrough understanding in my head. Let's move to the next slide. Then at that time, there was this discourse going on. Victor Papanak, he had just brought out his book on design for the real world. And Schumacher, small is beautiful. These were sort of very seminal works during the 70s. And this work had really agitated the faculty at the industrial design department because he was questioning and he was saying that, look, design is nothing to do with just making beautiful things or designing for the luxurious people. Let us focus on the real world. Next slide. So that was the other thing. So now these two books was again very important in the transformation of my thinking. Next slide. Now what I realized that it sort of these things put me in a direction uh, where I was exploring relationships, creativity, and care. Now, these three things are very important. And in design education, we have emphasized a lot on creativity. But the care part is tacit, it is not actively spoken about. There is no course which mentions the word care anywhere in the syllabus. Creativity is there. I think there is a need to become more conscious of this element of care. I've been looking at the evolution of the design process, and there again you see that the design process has been evolving uh, in the direction of your capacity to handle care. So, universal design human-centered design and then humanity-centered design. And so I put universal design in the framework of humanity-centered design. So you care for the humanity, and the whole design process changes. And today we are moving towards sustainability. So human well-being has become extremely important, and environmental well-being has become important. These are the two directions which are going to push the evolution of design pedagogy. And sooner we realize that, the better it is. If we can do that, then we are able to move faster. Next slide, please. Now, I will go through some of our work at IIT Delhi, what we were doing, and so on and so forth. But behind that, this quest for relationships, quest for creativity, quest for care. These three things are driving my thought process. Next, please. Um, this is one exercise which we were very fond of, and the whole class would do it. And so we'll pick something like a yoga posture and say, okay, now yoga posture is your figure. And as far as the ground is concerned, let's create something which is related to yoga. And so students really enjoyed it. And why it was an important exercise? Because it enabled us to see the figure ground relationship. All perception happens because of figure ground relationship. An animal will not be able to catch its prey unless it can differentiate between the figure that is of interest to it and the ground. Next. And then Rowena Reed's book on elements of design, very seminal work, beautiful work. We were very inspired by it, and we did many exercises in that direction. Next slide. Again, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Now, what was important in all these exercises is that we were training the eye um, to be watchful itself, or let's say our consciousness being watchful of the movement of the eye. And once we are watchful of that, um, then your visual sensitivity improves a lot. Next slide. And then we'll do some paper exercises, making all types of things out of paper, and then translate it into copper sheets. And the moment you translate, then the meaning changes, totally changes. Now it's like a sculpture. It's more durable. It is more ageless. And when the size is enhanced, then it has a very different impact. Next slide. And then, of course, conceptualizing form in soft materials, which you all do. Next. And then developing the sketching skills, conceptualization skills. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So you all do these things. We all do it. Then another thing which was very important for me at that time was CAD modeling, and I think I never hesitate in introducing students to CAD modeling. I have said it's extremely important because if you model something, then manufacturing becomes easy. If you just stick to paper drawings, then manufacturing is much more difficult. So CAD modeling was extremely important for us, and we encourage students to go in that direction. Next slide. 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 Next. 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 Now, We were using SolidWorks at that time. Nobody used to do CAD modeling or automotive styling in SolidWorks. We were happy doing it. And I personally feel that a student should not, or educational program should not introduce too many softwares. Keep one software, but go into the depth of it. That's extremely important. Rather than have 4 or 5 softwares and okay, we have Fusion 360 also, we have Inventor also, we have Maya also, um, so on and so forth. We have Alias also, Katia also. And the students don't go into the depth of it. So much better you have one software, but go into the depth of it. Because all software have similar capabilities. It's only that the ease may differ, but that does not matter much. Um, if you learn to handle it and you can take one software and do many things with it, it's a great happening. Anyway, when you go to the industry, and if that industry is using Alias or Katia, they have no problem in regrooming you. Now, Hero Honda um, has, you see, they ask the vendors to make parts. So the vendors make parts and they submit them for testing approval before they go into mass manufacturing. Now, what do they do with the parts? So they were lying with them, lots of them. They could not use these parts on roadworthy vehicles. So they decided to assemble them and they gave it to us. So they gave us 4 motorcycles free, which of course should not use on the road. But they were excellent tools for us to experiment with. So we opened up the bike and every student modeled a component. And then we took all these components together and we assembled them back into a motorcycle. Next slide. So um, the educational head of USA SolidWorks, they came and they were surprised by what we had done, our students had done. And they decided to make it on the cover page of their manual. Next slide. And this is again this next. Then I'm just taking you through the process that the students used to. So here is a project done by a student which got a award by the Nissan Motor Company also. Now, identifying something crucial. I talked of care, the importance of care. And one of the things that we identified was getting into the car and getting out of the car is the most difficult thing. Is that right? It is really difficult, very, very tedious because you want to be comfortable and so you are in lying, sort of a semi-lying posture, and then you have to get up, and then now you have to put your feet down on the ground, which is maybe 18 inches below. Very, very painful. So, so he develops sketches around it, and this was his design that when you open the door, then the roof also retracts and the seat also retracts, and then you are able to. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And this is a video, small video. So all this work was done 15 years back, and maybe more than 15 years back, 20 years back. But they were all done in very simple SolidWorks software. And what the other institutes were doing, I think we were far ahead of them. And this is where we used to get edge. And though we did not have any program in automotive design or UX UI, our students found places in all of these industries. We would encourage students to do whatever they are comfortable with. If some student was happy doing UX UI, we would attach them with the computer um, service center faculty, and they would work together. So in the final project, we always had an association um, of two supervisors. One would be from the engineering department and one would be from the design department, so that we don't lose the design mooring, but at the same time, the student is challenged to bring something more into it. Next slide. Here was another concept in that direction. Here, when the door opens, the seat also rotates. Then, what we also used to do was pose one problem and let the students come up with different solutions uh, to that same problem. And here, the problem was that a small windmill can generate 5 watts of power. And 5 watts of power is okay for charging a mobile phone. It is also okay for running a radio. And it can be okay for many other small little things. So, how can we generate this power? So, the students came up with the various types of solutions, how you can do it. Now, it is this type of an activity which really builds creativity, because the problem is the same. The problem is the same, and yet different students come up with different solutions. And next, I think I'll have to move fast. So these are the different types of exercises and the students would do. Next, next. Then we also encourage students to participate in design competition. And I think this is something which all universities must emphasize. Even if it is necessary to combine the work that you are doing in the design competition with the running courses, but do it, because the challenge that the student gets and the self-esteem that they develop um, in participating in these competition and winning them is immense. There can be nothing to parallel that. Next. So this is a simple, solid modeling exercise. Next. So you just get an idea. What you saw earlier was two motorbikes, how they can couple together. And then it becomes like a four-wheeler. So now you have friends, four friends moving around together on an excursion. Next, we're all prize winning awards. Here is a student who got an $50,000 award. So 50,000 was 22 lakhs at that time, which was a phenomenal amount for a student. He had passed out, so he was 1 year pass out. He participated in this contest. Next, here's a what you saw earlier was a folding wash basin, and a folding wash basin can be quite meaningful in cities like Bombay, where the flats are very small. And the way he handled all the problems was phenomenal, very very nice. Here's another, another, another. We also encourage students to develop prototypes. And we did not make it compulsory that all students have to do it. But if there was a student who was inclined to do it, we would give them all the support necessary. It brings about a lot of. See, if one student in the batch is able to develop a prototype, and the other students, though they have not done anything of that type, Still they feel that yes, they are capable of doing it because their peer group has done it. And next, it's a video, you can run it. So they'll get some old components, second-hand components, and it's great fun. So I saw Sanjay was taking me around. I saw some interesting effort in that direction, and I think this is something which needs to be encouraged. Next, here was another design, and again this element of care, which is running in all the conceptualization. Um, a wheelchair user is able to climb onto his vehicle, latch onto it, and drive off. You reach your destination, you can climb down sitting in your wheelchair. So now you have two levels of mobility. One is a mobility which is slow, but it is for indoor spaces, and the other is for the roadside. So giving this level of accessibility was mind changing. Yes. Unfortunately, the student who had developed, I wish he had gone into a startup, but he moved to Hero Honda. 10 years after this, IIT Madras has initiated a startup and they're making a series of such vehicles. Next. 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 Here's another prototype. You can move over. So you get an idea that some students would enjoy making it, we would encourage them, and it would be a mind changing thing for them. Next. Next. Putting up degree show, which happens all over. This is one thing I learned at RCA, that how important it is for the students to participate in these degree shows. Um, they had something very interesting I found there as far as the faculty and the student relationship was concerned. That the initial stages, the supervisors would urge them to think in different directions, etc. But there comes a point where they'll stop suggesting anything. Let the students carry on. And I think what once Professor Misha Black mentioned, that the student is always right. So do not think that he's on the wrong track. He has something, it is his vision which will shape the future. But he should not be stuck with his own one idea. He should explore, he must understand the depth and the value of that idea. And that's where showcasing students' work was very important. We used to extensively participate on any occasion outside IIT Delhi. Within IIT, we had the degree show, but outside, we will not miss the opportunity to participate. So this was something at some CI function at Ashoka Hotel. Next. 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 Then During Atal Bihari's time, we had the opportunity of working with KVIC, and then we were able to do many workshops with artisans. I'm just showing you one of the workshops. This was done in Dehradun at the Forest Research Institute. We had taken artisans from Saharanpur. And Saharanpur furniture you have seen, it's very intricate carving taste, surface carving. We thought let us groom these set of artisans to think a little differently. We were working at Forest Research Institute, so we had plenty of wood available. So we decided to work on twig and branch furniture. Idea was essentially not to cut the trees, cut the branches, which will replenish themselves. And what furniture can we create out of it? So this was the group. And you see Advik Gadnaik also there, who has produced some of your sculptures here. Uh, Next. So these were the, yeah, next, keep moving. Now, what we did was we showed these artisans something like 600 slides. And we focused on one premises, Tal Mel. So it said, look for relationships. And ये तालमेल बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट वर्ड है जो हमारे लैंग्वेज में है इट्स एन इम्पॉर्टेंट फंडामेंटल मिक्स एंड मैच जिसको आप बोलते हो अंग्रेजी में and just this thought enabled these artisans to look at those pieces and configure them differently. Next, next, next. So we are not telling them anything. They are discovering these relationships. This is some of my work um, as a potter working with clay. You can quickly go through it. So I stop here and um, I would urge that all students um, do not just stick to your profession, to your bread and butter. Keep the flame inside you burning, keep it burning, and do keep doing some art. You have that capability. Do not be so pragmatic and practical that you will only do work for your boss or your client. Um, Keep your weekends to do something of your interest, okay? Whether it's drawing or it is sketching or it's painting or it is singing or it is sculpting. Very important to do that. And I think these three things are important in life. Patience, personified by Vishnu. He is very patient. Chill out करे रहता है, लेटा रहता है. And then of course Shiva, who personifies effort. Tremendous amount of it. And then Brahma, knowledge. And these three things are important in design. I wish you all the best. There's so much more to talk of, but say we'll have occasions later on. Um, I must congratulate Sanjay and his team for building up such a fine university in design. It has a bright future. And as I mentioned, care is going to become important. And two areas where I would recommend strongly that they start programs, your university should start program. One is health sector. Tremendous scope. And there is nobody else who's doing it. And it is an industry which is much bigger than automobile industry or the fashion industry. So get into this health sector. tie up with all these big Apollo, Medinta, Fortis, etc., and the aims, get into it. And the other is sustainable design. My perception is that the next 10 years, all products will have to be redesigned for sustainability. And what sustainability would mean here is, first of all, increase the life of the product. So start making products where we can offer 10 years warranty. And if you can do that, yes, you'll be successful. So any student who designs a product with a very long life, which is very, very feasible, a toaster can last for 30 years. There is absolutely no reason if we just choose the materials correctly. And the additional cost will be maybe 5% more. That's all there is to it. But getting into sustainable design will assure a new era of abundance. This is something that we have to appreciate. If we start designing products with 30 years life, it doesn't mean that I have to use that product for 30 years. I can always pass it on, but I don't have to dump it in the garbage. Somebody else will pick it up. And there are so many people who don't have things, who need the benefit of technology. But by moving to sustainable design, we'll be ushering an era of abundance. This is something that we don't recognize. So, with these few words, I thank you all for this patient hearing. Uh, wish you all the best. Wish you a bright career. Design is the way to go. It not only blends your passion and your profession, it also makes you a good human being. And I have observed that designers are good fathers and good mothers. Thank you very much.